saw the trains in New York, they asked if the emergency button could also be backlit in the same way that those were. And our chief mechanical officer said, sure, that's an accommodation we can make, and it would work better in an emergency. So we put a halo light on the emergency button. Small, but very important piece of customer feedback that was incorporated. And then on the exterior of the train, you'll see that the doorway wayfinding decals present you with information before you even board about if you have a stroller, if you have a piece of luggage, if you need some accommodation there, this is the door for you to enter. And so some of you have seen these pictures before, but we offer them as the direction we are now heading. So you see the horizontal seating, you see an open gangway here, and they will be married pair open gangways, which means that it won't connect every car in the train set, but every 2 cars will be connected with the open gangway construct. You see here what I call the personality of the train. This is wallpaper that will help you understand that you're in the nation's capital. This is more of the horizontal seating, and I think in this picture you can really see how much wider the aisles are from today's fleet, as well as, again, you begin to see some of this dedicated space. So there on the floor you see the markings where we dedicate the space for strollers, luggage, and bicycles. And here you see the dedicated space for a wheelchair. That's very important to our customers who need that accessible space. This is the one remaining design issue that we're still working on with our Accessibility Advisory Committee very closely. So the intercar barrier is what prevents somebody with low vision or somebody who's blind from stepping off the platform and into the gap between the rail cars. And we're working very closely, actually, Brian's team, Shushil and Dave, are working very closely with the AAC on this new design. We're going to bring a demonstration model forward and have people see it at the platform level and experience it. Not to get into too much detail, but the strap on the bottom needs to be close enough to the platform so that somebody with low vision or somebody who's blind, when they go to step out, they will encounter it with their foot. It can't be any higher than their ankle. Otherwise, it creates a hazard for them. So we are leaving no stone unturned here. We're bringing the sample in with the vendor. We're going to test it with folks. Sandy Nozzle and others who went to New York with us have been incredibly helpful about working with us to help figure out which of these intercar barrier designs will work best for us. And so that work continues. I'm now turning it back over to Brian, who's going to talk about the ways in which the car becomes more sustainable.
Thank you, Lynn. To take advantage of the lighter weight and availability of aluminum, as well as the benefits of material recycling, 8Ks will have aluminum car bodies, as we have on our 6000 series cars. The open gangway connection that allows customers to walk between cars will be designed into pairs of cars, which improves the customer experience without requiring us to make significant investments in our maintenance facilities. Finally, to improve capacity and customer flow, as Lynn depicted on one of the last slides, we will increase the horizontal seating, essentially going from 1 to 3 horizontal, 2 to 3 front back seats in the 7Ks, to 1 and 3 front back, to 2 and 3 horizontal on the 8s. With regards to sustainability and savings, this is a depiction of what we believe the savings will be by going to the aluminum car shell and having the heated floor savings per car. And it obviously grows exponentially based on the size of the 8K order we get. So our next steps, customers will see the new designs in 3D next spring when Metro and Hitachi review the soft mock-up of the cars. As was depicted on the trip to New York, employees, including train operators, will have the opportunity to make final checks on the designs when the hard mock-up arrives in early 2025. Then production gets underway with the first pilot test cars to be delivered to Metro in the 4th quarter of 2025. That concludes our presentation. And Chair, I know we talked a bit about this in preparation for the presentation, but I do just want to cite the general manager's kind of vision and leadership on this. When he came in, we had a design for the 8K, and I think between talking to the team and talking to Hitachi, we've arrived at where we are. And I also just want to call out Lynn, because I've been involved in vehicle procurement at a previous agency, but also as a consultant, so probably 10 total. I've never really seen such input from the public and from kind of internal stakeholders. So I really think it allows the agency writ large, not just the employees, but the customers, to kind of coalesce around the design, because it may be used too often, but this really is transformational for the agency, and we're really excited about it. So thank you. And with that, we'll take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian and Lynn. I just want to say thank you and the entire team. As I understand, the Metro Rail transformation and vehicle engineering staff is heavily engaged in this process. We want to say big kudos to them. Tremendous work in progress. I also want to applaud, as you just stated, the depth and quality of the community and rider engagement. That's tremendous. I didn't realize you all took those steps in the design of something that's important. I do have one technical question before I turn it over to committee members and then board members for questions. And the WSTC, my colleagues had a very good question that surfaced recently, and that is, in our transition in moving from steel to aluminum, has there been an analysis of the safety implications? Are there any issues, concerns, or differences from stainless steel versus aluminum?
Yeah, there are certainly differences, Chair, but as noted, aluminum is not unusual. We have it on the 6Ks. I think at one point stainless steel was included in the spec because the thought was, from a cleaning standpoint, it may look aesthetically more pleasing. But there are regulations we have to comply with regards to crash energy management, which we have continued to vet with Hitachi, which we have no concerns about. And I would note, Chair, that Shashil, in addition to the great work he does and his team, Shashil was involved in vehicle procurement at Metro North before he got here. So in addition to being the chief mechanical officer, he's really well poised to kind of lead this team and has this level of expertise.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Committee members, Dr. Lowe.
Thanks for a great presentation. I will just say that I recently visited Toronto and rode their subway system, and it was my first experience with an open gangway, even though I don't know, I've ridden systems all over the world, but somehow that was the first one. It's very pleasant. I was really surprised by how much nicer it is. So I'm so glad that we're taking a look at this. And yes, thank you to the general manager for raising this as an issue and not giving up on the idea that we could still try to get this in the 8Ks. I think that the general public would also like some reassurance that, in addition to getting all this great input, that we are baking into the design of the 8Ks all the lessons we've learned from problems that we've had with other generations of rail cars. I know from our internal conversations that that is happening and that nobody knows better. Shashil probably has like a set of tattoos at this point that represent these lessons learned. But let's share that with everyone. Can you describe a little bit, has Shashil had some time, perhaps like with a counselor to get these issues out and to incorporate them into the design?
No, fine question, Dr. Lowe, and we'll take the advice. We can certainly do a better job of kind of publicizing what we're doing internally. So I guess a couple of things on that. Shashil and the team have been baking the lessons learned into everything we do with the 8K design. And right now, Hitachi's been a very good partner with regards to changing some of this design. So those discussions through project meetings are literally going on every day. I would also say that we've recently instituted a quarterly meeting that we have with the entire agency. And I say that because I think it's a lot of the lessons learned about vehicle procurements and what you can do better isn't just about the vehicle maintenance team. It's about the agency. It's about the system we run. So Andy's team, Teresa's team, all the other parties from procurement, from IT, we're in a room once a quarter vetting every single issue we either have or may have in the future. And I would say that we recently kicked off the quarterlies, and I would say it was so dense that we had an hour and a half scheduled. I think we went 2.5 hours, and we actually have a follow-up of the first meeting scheduled tomorrow just because we couldn't fit everything in. So I do think we're taking advantage of the lessons learned. And quite honestly, Dr. Lowe, I mean, this board is more read into issues with vehicles than any board I've ever been exposed to, based on some of what we've had on the 7th K. And I would say it's an opportune time for us to be making some of the progress and pivoting out of issues with the 7K to really allow the team to start to look at this in a more comprehensive manner. Now, we all know this. They're all doing double duty out there, and this focus, the timing couldn't be better.
I think that's very well said on timing. I agree with that observation. And I think that this also represents the future that we want for WMATA, in which labor and management are working together to deliver the best possible customer experience, and that we're not leaving intel on the table that we could be acting on. I'm glad to hear it. Not surprised that was a 2.5-hour meeting, but I'm glad that we're taking the time to make sure that we get all of this baked in.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smedberg.
Thank you. Brian and/or Lynn, technology. As we move to ATO, the general manager has mentioned AI a few times in certain things.
Heading dog. Phone.
At what point does that come into your planning on this, or is it already part of the discussion?
We actually have Brian mentioned the quarterly. We have a subcommittee that we formed just on the digital aspects across the board related to the rail car. And it goes from, the data that the rail car is going to feed to the control center, to the camera access on board, to the passenger information displays, right? So the real-time passenger displays. These cars are all digital. There's no static signage. Even the maps are displayed digitally. So there is a tremendous amount of technology here. And it's bigger than just railcar engineers. It's also our information technology group, and it's sub-vendors to Hitachi and so forth, all coming together to make this a next-gen experience for our customers, and to make sure that the rest of WMATA is prepared to support and take advantage of that technology.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
If I can, Chair, I just want to mention one thing that wasn't listed here that I think is important, is the door placement. And different agencies have different amount of doors. So we are going to have the same doors as the 7000 series doors. And that is important because eventually, and this is, Chair, the nexus to technology, we are an ATO now. We're not sure if we can do this with ATO, but one day we're going to have to move to communications-based, computer-based train control system, which is advanced signaling, because our signaling system is becoming antiquated, and that's the next generation in our industry. We want to eventually work towards platform screen doors, and we mentioned that a couple times already. It's the safest way to run a system in the world is platform screen doors. That has to tie into our signaling system and all the advanced technology around that. So that is why, so we can have finally, for the first time in a long time, I think in the history of Metro, 7,000, 8,000 series trains will actually be able to berth at the exact same place on a platform. That can integrate to the physical infrastructure of platform screen doors and the technology of signaling. So we could kind of really look like a Hong Kong or a Singapore or Madrid or some of these other places that are, top of the world. So that is, I just wanted to highlight that we didn't mention that, but that is one of the things we're trying to do, is think strategically how Metro is going to operate over the next 40, 50 years, not just, buying a fleet today.
Thank you, Randy. Ms. Babers?
Yes, thank you all for a great presentation. Just for clarity, and I believe that I know the answer. So we're saying that each car will only have one dedicated spot for wheelchair, and then one dedicated shared spot, well, not to be shared, but that a stroller, luggage, or a bike or scooter or whatever can fit on, correct? I mean, there's not one at each end of one train.
So maybe the best way to do this is to illustrate. So the dedicated wheelchair space is at one designated door placement. And if you look down the aisle here, you can see where the wheelchair space is, and then you can see the dedicated I'm sorry to point, the dedicated luggage spaces at the other door placement. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that there's one on each car, train car. So it's probably too much to ask for whether we can put the little, like at the airport parking garage, the little red light above that indicates whether or not there's something, a bike already in this particular car, so that if I'm standing on the platform with a stroller, you know, and the train is coming in, because there'll only be two cars connected with the gangplank. If I see, oh, red light is on, let me try to make my way to the next two cars to see if I can get an empty space.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. We'll take it back.
Okay, thank you.
We're in design, we can look at anything.
All right, thanks. Well, I was gonna say, that does not show all the people who's gonna be standing up, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Martin Proctor?
Great. Well, thank you so much, team. I think this is wonderful. I always appreciate all the accessibility that you bring to this design. I'm looking forward to the extra poles, the extra handrails, extra space, the tactile flooring for us that are living with mobility and low vision issues to get back and forth between these two amazing sets of areas that will now allow us to have that mobility. I love that we are moving towards the gold standard of accessibility, and I just want to say thank you, and we're excited about this, and thank your team so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So Brian and Lynn, thank you for an excellent presentation. With no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned, and I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Letourneau to begin the Finance and Capital Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer, and welcome to this morning's Finance and Capital Committee. First, we have approval of our agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Any objections from members of the committee? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our June 8th meeting before us for approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved as presented. Okay, so we have one item on our agenda today for the Finance Committee, but it is a very big and highly anticipated item, and that is a discussion of Metro's future financial planning. FY 2024 has not even technically come yet. I know we passed our budget and we're moving towards fiscal year in July, but the gravity of the challenge that we're facing for fiscal year 2025 has been something that we've been upfront about throughout that previous budget process, and it's now time to face head on. So I think the number one thing that I've heard, and probably other members of the board have heard from riders and from our stakeholders, is that they want to know more about exactly the situation that Metro is in and what the consequences of the fiscal cliff are. And so today's meeting answers a lot of those questions. And it's really the beginning of what I think will be a community conversation. One last thing before I turn it over to Randy to sort of kick us off. I've heard and seen already some comments that Metro does this all the time, and Metro says they're running out of money, and Metro needs help, and this is just a way to get attention. This is real. This is not an every year occurrence. This is not standard operating procedure. This is a confluence of events, structural issues, which we'll get into, and COVID and federal relief funds, which are running out. So I just want to make it very clear to the riders, and sometimes I make the grave mistake of reading the comment sections of news articles, which you should never do. But a lot of people think, well, this is just Metro, making comments like they always do. No, it's not. This is a very different situation. So with that, Randy, I think I'm supposed to turn it over to you to kick it off.
Well, thank you, Chair Letourneau, and I try not to read all the comments as well. But with that said, I think there has been a lot of great community engagement on this topic the last day and a half. I expect a significant amount more after this presentation. My comments are going to be pretty simple in the sense of what I think you, Cindy, and Tom are going to go through today is really, we're trying to establish the facts on the ground. And at no point here is Metro, I think, in a position or, quite frankly, maybe the ultimate responsible party to suggest what the solution is to the financial future going forward. The terms that I've been trying to use are that I believe we very much need a stable, predictable, and sustainable funding source for Metro. And I fundamentally believe that needs to be both operating and capital. In 2018, members of this board, the community, worked incredibly hard to come together on a very difficult situation to provide capital funding when the place had significant state of good repair and safety needs. That work is why, quite frankly, we are in the service we're in today. Without SafeTrack, we would not be running what we're running at the level of service today, and that needs to be recognized of all the great work that was done. With that said, $500 million in 2018 is not $500 million in 2023, and with inflation and finance rates, I don't want anyone to think that our capital funding is just okay, and it's we don't have an issue there just because we have a few more years of runway. At some point, we have to have a logical conversation about how the two interplay together. And I think the public rightfully is probably wondering why we're buying new trains, going to zero-emission buses, and building new bus facilities when next year we may not have enough money to operate said trains and buses. And to the average person, I think we need to be credibly explain that because it's not just that it's two buckets of funding. So I think, what I really appreciate the board's leadership. We passed a strategic plan this year. One of the topics it talked about in the strategic plan was the word a dedicated funding source. That can mean a variety of things. I think it's pretty crystal clear that Metro is not like any other of our peer agencies in the country. Most all agencies have some type of dedicated funding source. I fundamentally believe that could also help Metro have more responsibility for itself and have to look after itself in a way that could give predictability for our funding partners. And I think we feel for them that this topic kind of gets bounced on them from time to time. But as board member, as you mentioned, this is an existential threat for Metro, and is not a one-time piece. I think we've made an enormous amount of strides in the last year. I know that the chair is going to preview some year-end stuff shortly. But I think the message that we're trying to get out to the public now is lots of advance warning. We're not trying to put fear into people as much as we're trying to educate and bring understanding together. And let's not go back on all of the great work and sacrifices people have made over the last, ultimately 40 years to build arguably maybe the best transit asset in the country. That provides the value of this whole region. So again, we really want to be fact-driven here. We're not trying to get in, we're not opining. We're not trying to tell people how we're going to solve this at this point. We're doing it very early so we can actually get all of our region to come together because ultimately this is a regional system and the region has to solve this together. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it over to our CFO and EVP of Planning and Performance who have spent an enormous amount of time and know this topic very well. And then I think we welcome all of your feedback and comments and work towards next step. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Yetunde Olumide. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and Executive Vice President here at the Washington Metro. This morning, Mr. Webster and I will discuss the future financial planning from FY25 through 35. We'll summarize the value Metro provides to the region. We'll preview key points for discussion as we move along and discuss the community and regional ramifications of not sufficiently investing in Metro. Metro's strategic transformation plan sets out 4 goals for Metro, aligning Metro with desired regional outcomes. Service excellence, making Metro more reliable and convenient, such as increased bus and rail service approved in the FY24 budget. Talented teams, improving recruitment and skill development. Regional opportunity and partnerships, increasing community engagement and strengthening regional networks. And achieving both financial and environmental sustainability. Tom.
Thank you. Tom Webster, EVP for Planning and Performance at Metro, and thank you and good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and board. So some additional context here to start. Over the past 50 years, Metro and the region have grown together, and Metro has had a transformative impact on the region. The system has changed how we move, where we live and work, how we experience events and entertainment, and has had a profound effect or impact on the quality of life for our region's people and communities. So some stats. Within the compact area, 60% of the population, 70% of the jobs, and 50% of the employers are located within half a mile of a Metro rail station or bus stop. The concentration of development and new development around Metro is a clear indicator of the value placed on proximity to Metro and to transit. This includes 65% of new office development and 50% of new apartments, again, within half a mile of Metro. The information and the facts on this slide come from recent updates from the United States Census and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Thanks to the region and the federal government's commitment and investment through Metro's capital improvement program, Metro has significantly improved safety, quality, reliability, and the performance of the system's assets, infrastructure, equipment. And we've also substantially reduced the state of good repair backlog, so the amount of overdue infrastructure and equipment renewal and maintenance over the past several years, and much more investment is planned over the next few years to continue to reduce that backlog and improve the performance of the system. Metro is also adapting to how customers travel. Metro's all-day, all-week service optimizations invest more resources in the midday, weekend, and late-night service all week long. This service optimization better meets the needs of customers, not just weekday commutes to and from the office. Customers are seeing the improvement and they're responding. Rail satisfaction has increased significantly, up 16 points from this time last year, as we've increased service and improved reliability. Bus satisfaction is trending up as well, and we know there are near-term opportunities to continue to build on that with our Better Bus Network redesign and investments like the Clear Lanes program to improve bus speeds and on-time performance. In addition to our own customer surveys, Washington Post poll back in February shows that 3 out of 4 people in our region view Metro positively, and that includes both customers and non-customers. And more customers are riding our improving service. Ridership has consistently been growing over the past 3 years, and for both bus and rail, weekend ridership is at or near or above pre-pandemic levels. And we have a lot more in the works to improve and expand transit's value to the region in alignment with the goals and objectives in the strategic transformation plan, including but not limited to the Better Bus Network efforts, the 8,000 series trains that we heard about just before this committee meeting, our zero-emission bus program, and our Blue, Orange, Silver corridor capacity and reliability planning effort.
Thank you, Tom. So before we discuss current opportunities, let's revisit a little Metro history. As you know, this region had the foresight and daring to plan and commit to building a complete regional transit system that would change how the region moves. And now the region enjoys a transit system that connects people to jobs, schools, attractions, healthcare, and opportunities. However, As you know, this bold vision was not fully matched with a plan for funding operations, and while the jurisdictional subsidy contributions have been critical, everyone acknowledges that this puts strain on our partner budgets and was seen even back in 1976. In 2018, the region delivered historic dedicated capital funding to support renewal and modernization, but the structuring operating funding remains a challenge. Looking more closely at how the operating budget is funded, we see the following main sources. State and local subsidies have typically paid for about half of Metro's operations and maintenance. State law in Maryland and Virginia caps annual subsidy growth at 3% with limited exclusions. Fares and other revenue typically made up the other half of the operating funding. When ridership and these revenues plummeted during the pandemic, the federal government stepped in with emergency relief to help cover those losses. Federal relief accounts for the remaining 24% of the FY24 budget and is projected to run out before FY25. The main point here is the gold breakaway section. 24% of the FY24 funds is non-recurring and is depleted after FY24. The end of federal relief is creating funding challenges for transit agencies across the country and is seen in these headlines. However, even if transit across the nation is facing a similar crisis, the situation is more acute for Metro because Metro alone lacks the kind of dedicated funding sources many pair systems have. California recently struck a deal to avoid immediate collapse in FY25. New York also solved their crisis in May with a deal that not only increases funding, but also provides for additional service with more trains on nights and weekends to support the ongoing recovery. This chart shows significant role federal relief, depicted in gold again, has played in balancing the budget and the deficit in red that emerges once it runs out. In FY25, we expect ridership to recover to 75% of pre-pandemic levels and the funding deficit to total $750 million. This significant structural deficit continues in out years and could be as high as $1.2 billion by FY35. Metro's $750 million deficit can be broken into three categories. 26%, or $196 million, from the jurisdictional subsidy credit at the start of the pandemic, when Metro provided support to the jurisdictions, thus reducing the overall subsidy and foregoing 3% increases. 38%, or $288 million, from decreased revenues from fares, parking, and advertising since the pandemic. And 36% from inflation and Metro's contractual commitments. Metro, like other transit agencies, is particularly exposed to inflation. It impacts the expense, Metro, like other transit agencies, is particularly exposed to inflation, and it impacts the expense prior to this. In FY18, the last increase we had in fares also made a difference, and I'll speak to that in later slides. And now, Tom. One more. I'm sorry, my notes are a little mixed up here. All right, Tom.
Sure. So as the general manager mentioned at the outset, thank you. As Mr. Clark mentioned at the outset of the meeting, we also have a looming issue with our capital investment and capital outlook. As I mentioned, there's been substantial investment through the capital program over the past several years. The capacity of our dedicated funding for new bond issuances is projected to run out towards the end of the current 6-year period, so the FY29 time period, at which point there will be a substantial deficit between our projected needs for system state of good repair and modernization and our projected available funding from other sources.
There we go. All right. The deficit is so large that Metro cannot close it by itself. Going back to the $750 million operating deficit, as seen here, it is greater than 1/4 of the operating budget, and it vastly exceeds the last major fare increases and service cuts considered or adopted by the board. For FY22, Metro was considering a pandemic doomsday service plan prior to CRISA and ARPA funding that would have cut service and produced net savings of about $279 million. Prior to this, in FY18, the last base fare increase, bus base fare went from $1.75 to $2, and rail base fare increased from $2.15 to $2.25, and the max fare increased from $5.90 to $6. Parking also increased by about 10 cents. In total, the revenue budget grew by about $20 million. That same year, rail frequency was reduced about 33% during peak periods, with headways growing from 6 to 8 minutes for a total savings of $10 million. The $750 million deficit towers over these past initiatives.
So the region, the federal government, and the board have made and continue to make substantial investment in the metro system to support an impressive level of transit service and high-quality customer experience that supports regional mobility and regional goals. I think it's important to take a moment to understand Metro's cost structure in the context of such a large $750 million deficit. Some of Metro's costs vary in close alignment with specific levels of bus and rail service that are operated, like bus and train operator work hours and costs, electricity and fuel, energy costs to power vehicles. There's a lot more to Metro than just the person operating the bus or the train. So behind every bus and train operator, there are many more people operating and maintaining the system that we have, cleaning stations, fixing, inspecting elevators and escalators, maintaining signal systems and power systems, police and security, safety, compliance, and administrative support. So those are just a few examples of sort of the behind the scenes and the things that lead to the quality service that we have. This type of cost structure has advantages and disadvantages. On the positive side, the structure means that Metro can often add rail and bus service frequency for a comparatively small amount of incremental cost. So for example, in the FY24 budget, so the budget that starts in a couple of weeks, Metro is adding rail and bus service frequency, and on rail, we're adding about 11% more service for about 2% more cost. On the negative side, to reduce costs to close a deficit of this unprecedented size of $750 million. Service reductions would be severe, and accompanying reductions of those fixed costs would have massive impacts on the quality of the customer experience, the reliability of equipment and infrastructure, and security and administrative capacity to maintain compliance with mandates and regulations. It just doesn't work out that, for example, a 25% budget gap could be closed with a 25% reduction in service. So we've done some benchmarking to compare our cost structure with the industry nationally and internationally, and that benchmarking confirms that our cost structure is in close alignment with industry on both Metro Rail, Metro Bus, as well as Metro Access.
Okay, so Metro is closely managing the costs it can control. Recall that about 70% of the operating costs are for personnel operating or maintaining the system, the majority of whom are under a collective bargaining agreement. Since 2018, Metro has achieved savings of over $300 million through healthcare cost sharing with employees, maximizing real estate assets through the Joint Development Program. In addition, the office consolidation program is nearly done with the relocation of approximately 3,000 Metro employees and personnel from 10 locations into 3 LED office buildings located in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Metro has also reduced over 1,000 vacancies, as well as reductions made from our non-revenue vehicle fleet. Contractor costs are also being closely monitored and managed, and Metro is now actively engaged in consolidating 5 separate call centers while standardizing and upgrading technology on the unified platform.
So to close a deficit of this magnitude without additional operating funding or investment, Metro would have to severely cut service at really catastrophic scale. Importantly, what we're reviewing here and over the next few slides, it's not a budget proposal or a detailed service plan. It's a concept or scenario to show the scale of service reductions that would be required and some of the implications of that to close such a large deficit. Because of the economics of transit that I discussed a couple of slides ago, the only way to cut service enough to close that large deficit is with really devastating cuts to service and all the things that our workforce does behind the rail and bus operators to support quality service. So it means not just substantially less service, but also a worse customer experience. You can see this in this scenario, to close a $750 million gap, we think we would have to cut service on rail and bus by about 2/3, so 67% cuts to Metro Rail and Metro Bus, and corresponding cuts to Metro Access. These cuts, you can see on the right-hand side, would eliminate the deficit mathematically here, reducing expense by $950 million, a corresponding reduction in revenue because of so much less ridership, with a net impact of $750 million. However, customers would certainly abandon the system. Ridership would stop growing, and it would be extraordinarily crowded. Our estimates that we, with this level of service, we could only serve about 300,000 rail trips on a weekday and about 200,000 bus trips on a weekday because of the reduced number of trains in service and reduced frequency and the reduction in bus lines and bus routes across the region. And just for reference, we are currently carrying on busy weekdays over 400,000 customers on customer trips on rail and approaching 400,000 on bus. So this is substantially less capacity than our ridership is today. In addition, service cuts and reductions at this magnitude and the corresponding reductions in fixed costs would result in the elimination of about 5,300 jobs, so 40% of Metro's jobs. The next few slides review the impact of these on Metro Rail, Metro Bus, and Metro Access. A 67% cut in Metro Rail would be a dramatic reduction of trains in service from 124, which is our FY24 budgeted level, to about 52 trains. A reduction in service hours, we would essentially close at 9 or 9:30 at night, and be unable to support evening events and the nighttime workforce. The corresponding frequencies that customers would see on the rail system are 20 to 30 minute service on the rail system. That's in comparison to 5 to 12 minute service in our FY24 budget. And as I mentioned, customers would also see real degradation in terms of crowding, in terms of cleanliness, security, and reliability of things like elevators and escalators and other customer-facing services. For Metro Bus at this scale, 98 bus lines would be eliminated entirely, so no service at all. The lines that would remain would see service frequencies of 20 to 30 minutes, so two or three buses an hour. And like rail, there'd be no bus service after 9:30 at night. So customers would see really, really terrible wait times, long gaps between buses, and those buses would be crowded along the whole line. But more importantly, most of the region would have no bus service, as bus lines would be eliminated. Cutting the fixed route rail and bus system would also mean reducing the service area covered by Metro Access. So Metro Access would serve fewer customers and connect to many fewer destinations. And all service beyond that's required by regulation would essentially be eliminated. And of course, this has dramatic impacts on some of our most transit-dependent customers. Just to illustrate what customers might see in a scenario like this, so we have a couple of examples of the customer information displays on platforms. So for customers standing on the platform at New Carrollton in this upcoming budget year, you would see a train departing and then a train departing 8 minutes later and 15 minutes later. You can see on the right-hand side, 30-minute frequency with very, very long waits between trains. So the train would likely fill up at New Carrollton and be crowded or overcrowded, and then not have capacity to pick up more customers as it moves down the line on the Orange Line. Another example at National Airport platform. So in our FY24 service, we'll have blue and yellow line frequency that is quite good. So a 2-minute wait, a 5-minute wait, and an 8-minute wait in our FY24 full service. Customers arriving at National Airport with their luggage from after getting off a plane in a scenario with 67% less service would see 16-minute wait, 22 minutes after, followed by 22 minutes, followed by another 14 minutes. And those trains, you can imagine, will be full when they arrive at National Airport. So really, really terrible levels of service. A bus example, again, this is not a service plan, but an example of a type of route that would be eliminated. We have buses arriving every 6 minutes during the peak period on the G8. In a scenario where we're eliminating 98 lines, this line would be eliminated and there would be no service for those customers. I think you're all familiar with this concept of a transit death spiral, but service reductions at this magnitude wouldn't solve the problem. They solve the problem temporarily for the first year, but with insufficient funding, much lower levels of service, declining ridership, this cycle would ultimately result in really the death of transit and a bad scenario for our region. Go off script for a moment here. We had some questions about what a fare increase would potentially do for this service or for this deficit. The level of fare increases that would be required to put a meaningful dent in the $750 million deficit quickly become unrealistic. So you see the scenario here, if we calculated that fares would be 5.5 times larger with essentially a $11 bus fare, an $11 to a $33 rail fare, and a Metro Access fare of $22 to $35. These are assuming that roughly 50% elasticity, so customers continue to ride. Deficit of this scale with fares is really unrealistic and unachievable. In conclusion, the impacts on our customers and on ridership are quite clear from a service reduction scenario at this scale. But it's not just customers that would be hurt by this. The whole region would feel the pain of service reductions at this scale. Customers would abandon transit, and instead many would switch to driving, leading to more congestion on our roads, worse traffic, reduced access to jobs and to opportunity, and much worse pollution. This would hurt the region's economic competitiveness and degrade the quality of life for the people in our region. And this leads to the existential threat that the general manager described earlier.
Thank you, Tom. So with that, we have been and we will continue with engaging the stakeholders and the community as we move forward. And then in the fall, more conversations around the FY24 budget development process. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn over to the GM just for some closing comments.
Yeah, one final couple of little highlights there that, and thank you for the staff. And obviously, it's not just Tom and Utundi that, the team behind this has done an enormous amount of work, and we stand ready to work with our partners to continue to do analysis and a lot of collaboration on data, which is going to happen obviously over the months and weeks and months, and hopefully not years ahead. A couple of just points I wanted to make sure I know this board is aware of it publicly. It's, everyone's really focused that we have a $750 million deficit problem. That's not the actual problem. That is next year's problem. The year after that, the problem is larger. The year after that, it's larger. We have a structural financial problem at Metro. And so we do not have an ability to solve next year without then solving the year after unless we structurally solve it. So I'm not suggesting that if we don't come up with 750 next year, then we can't run the operation. Of course we can, but we will be back here having the same conversations the year after. And as I mentioned before, the capital conversation, I think we, pretty frankly, the staff, we anticipate coming to the board potentially even this fall, starting to think through capital scenarios where we start managing our cash in a way that we have to take 5 years worth of capital money and make it last another 10, which could have serious impacts to ordering more trains, and other big projects that we know we have to do for the agency. The other thing that I think is really important mentioning is we also as an agency want to run more service than we're running today. And a good example of that is this team with this board, with a lot of effort from this board and our business community and advocates, have pushed for a lot of years to do a better best network redesign. And so the network redesign, we are going to have a constrained version, i.e. the same resources we spend today and what that network looks like. But overwhelmingly, everyone wants more bus service in this region. We have parts of this region that don't have service on Saturday and Sundays. We have parts of this region that don't have service in the PM after rush hour. We have parts of this region that don't have enough frequency And so there's an economic and a sustainability and an equity aspect that this board has highlighted. So we want to actually eventually run more bus service. And on the rail side, I think it's clear we have to one day get back to running later service on the weekends, and we have to open earlier on the weekends. On a Saturday and Sunday with our current service, you cannot get to a flight at DCA on a Saturday or Sunday morning for a morning flight using Metro. That should be unacceptable in the national capital of America. And so we know we have on Friday and Saturday nights have to get later, and on Saturday, Sunday mornings have to get earlier, let alone continue to build the midday service. So just putting those two markers down that we have a structural issue, and I don't want anyone to get lost in that today's service is what the only service will be. We obviously want to continue to grow both service delivery and the amount of customers that we can reach and serve long-term as the agency. So I know the board members all understand that, but publicly I think it's easy for the public to get lost in one term or one number they hear without the context of the whole piece. So with that, Mr. Chairman, the staff is ready to...
I appreciate that, Randy, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. This has been a conversation that we've been having as a board and with staff for several months, and so what was presented today went through a lot of discussion and refinement. I wanted to just raise a couple things just for clarity purposes and then open it up here for discussion. The first thing that we hear about is fare evasion when it comes to any budget discussion around Metro. So can you give us sort of an order of magnitude, and I know the answer, but can you give us, for the public, kind of an order of magnitude what the impact of fare evasion is and what we realistically could sort of solve through the initiatives that we've already started?
So in terms of the scale of the financial impact of fare evasion, so we have fare evasion of about 13% on Metro Rail, which equates to somewhere in the range of 30 million. So in the scale compared to 750 million, not a substantial share of the total deficit. On Metro Bus, I believe the...
Thank you. On Metro Buses, right about 11 million was the last annual amount recorded on fare evasion.
So there's about 40 million worth of fare evasion happening in the system. We have a fare gate project to expand fare gates. We have initiatives to put more officers out on the stations and do various things. We saw at Fort Totten roughly a 50% reduction in fare evasion. So assuming we got this widespread adoption all over the system, we could potentially gain about 20 million. Is that fair? Maybe a little high.
That may be a little high.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the tens of millions, not.
So in other words, we're not going to solve our budget deficit through fare evasion. Of course, I know that, but I think the public conversation, is very focused on that. Of course, we absolutely want it, and I don't want to indicate in any way that I don't want that, because I do. But I think it's important context. The other thing I want to get clarity on is the jurisdictional subsidy piece. One of the slides showed the significant amount of funding that Metro sort of decided to forego at the onset of the pandemic, 196 million, by giving credits to jurisdictions by reducing subsidy during that period to sort of help them out. Do you want to just elaborate a little bit on exactly what we did and sort of, explain that slide a little bit, or that number?
Happy to do so. So the 196 million really built on, most of it was about $135 million of a subsidy credit provided to the jurisdictions that would have been provided with or without whether Metro received the federal relief or not. But this was right at the beginning of the pandemic when nobody knew what was going to happen with the pandemic. So that accounts for about $135 million of it. There was also in FY22 a 3% subsidy growth that was forgone for that year, about $34 million. And then through the years, as we accumulate and count from 21 upwards to where we are now, The increment on the 3% growth and on the 135 foregone makes up the delta of that difference. That gets us to $196 million.
And we're not proposing to claw that back necessarily at this moment, nor I think could we. But I think the point is we took steps when the region needed it to forego revenue to help our jurisdictional partners. But that did have an impact in speeding up the deficit that we now have. And now we're in trouble. And so we are going to need some help from our jurisdictional partners. Okay, let me open it up first for committee members for discussion. Ms. Babers.
So thank you all for that dreary presentation. But so I guess I just want to make a few comments and then a clarifying statement. So, you know, I think it's critical for everyone to understand that $750 million is a lot. And, you know, even if we don't know how much each jurisdiction, you know, will be requested to donate or contribute, let's just say that for the district, it's $300 million. And as a district representative, I want to remind everyone, you know, we just did our FY24 budget where we had to close a $1.7 billion gap, the biggest ever. And we're going to be looking quite critically at WMATA's operating structure as it relates to the savings that you all have already tried to get. And I shared this with you all a couple of days ago. And I do thank you for the clarifying verbal readout of how you all have already tried to close the gap. And I think you all said from 2018 through 2024, it's about $300 million in savings that you all have already identified. Well, we're going to want to have our team jump even, you know, further into exactly, is there anything left on the table? We're going to be looking for more than $20 million, Tracy. But yes, absolutely. And so I just want to put it out there that, you know, we just don't have $200 or $300 million to hand over without making sure that, well, we don't have it to hand over, but so we'll absolutely have to look at some long-term solution. But we'll also be looking very intently at the savings and can we get any more savings? So just put that out there as an expectation. But thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. McAndrew.
Very, very dreary, but we'll solve it. You know, for Maryland's perspective, you know, the governor and the secretary understand that transit and WMATA in particular is very important to our state's economy and what we're ultimately trying to achieve in terms of connecting people to jobs and opportunity. And we're going to just work through this issue with WMATA and with our federal delegation, but also, you know, this summer and fall, we've got a Transportation Trust Fund Revenue Commission that we need to look at because our own revenues are not where they need to be for us to be able to do things like invest in WMATA, pay for this great project called the Red Line in Baltimore that we're going to be doing. But we look forward to doing it in partnership with WMATA, and that's why, you know, when we passed a bill in the General Assembly this last year, we put WMATA in the bill as a partner to that effort. So we're looking forward to it. An educational moment. I'm looking at slide 28 here, I believe, but there's a proposed pandemic cut from FY22. And just trying to jog my memory here, it's $279 million of savings. Can you give me a sense of what type of service was being offered at a $279 million in savings there?
What slide was that, Joe?
The one that's on.
Okay.
These cuts never actually happened. This was
Yeah.
like the hypothetical doomsday budget. I think it involved like closing multiple stations and things
Yeah.
like that.
I'm just trying to get a sense, like, if I remember correctly, that doomsday cut was pretty drastic.
Yeah, it was a reduction in service. I think Paul and I were the only ones on the board. It was a reduction in service plus plus a series of station closures, bus service was reduced. Not as drastic, obviously, as this.
Yeah, I'm not asking the question because I think it's
Yeah.
the right thing to do. I'm
No,
just
no,
trying
right.
to get a sense of, even at 279 million, if that looks appetizing, it wasn't then, and it probably shouldn't be now.
Well, and also an important point, Mr. Chair, if I could, was when the prior GM made that proposal, the reaction from the community, our stakeholders and riders was swift. Absolutely not. You can't do this. People depend on this system. I mean, it was, across the board, it was pretty much a dismissal of that proposal.
Ms. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to try to take an optimistic view because I think this presentation, I don't even want to use the word dreary, because I think this actually may be the moment probably big months or maybe a year, hopefully not years. This actually may be the moment when this region can actually make some significant progress on addressing the structural funding issues that WMATA has been facing since its founding. So let's look for the silver lining here, that this presentation can spur action, and I hope that it will. I think one thing to respond to what Ms. Babers was saying, looking at the way that WMATA is operating, all of these types of savings that we've talked about in the slide, talking about places where we've identified that we can save money on our end. I think Mr. Clark has really brought a fresh approach on that. I just want to compliment the work that he and the team have done over the past year. Sometimes we get lost in things that have been done the same way for years, and we forget that you can look at those with a fresh eye and say, why are we doing it this way? Could we not save money if we did it a different way? And I've heard that over and over from the team, the senior leadership, and others. And we are making progress on that, and we are looking at efficiencies, and I think that will continue. I'm confident that work will continue. That by itself is not going to be enough, as we've talked about, but it should be part of the solution. In fact, no single thing is probably going to be enough. We're going to need to not only shake the couch cushions, but look under the seats, vehicles, and everywhere else that we can find solutions. And I'm confident that the region can come together and do that. Another piece of good news: this is not something that is a surprise to many folks in the region, and there's been a lot of work on this in this region and in other parts of the country to identify potential solutions. There's a whole list of stuff out there that we should be considering, and I'm looking forward to those conversations starting. Today we're seeing the scope of the issue, and I'm looking forward to getting to the, what can the region do about it? What are the solutions? So I appreciate that we're starting that conversation today, and I do want to commend the team on all the work that went into this presentation. Very clear, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Paul? Oh, why don't we do Dr. Lowe first and then Chair Smith?
Okay. All right, Kate, let's get to it. Okay, I agree that there is no one solution that's going to fix this, and it's sort of talking past each other and reductive to create straw man scenarios. Like, what if we charged $11 for the bus? So we will have to start to get more granular with the scenarios. Obviously, we can't charge $11 for the bus, but what if it was $3? How much can I get from that? We are going to have to start working through very granular scenarios in order to understand all of the pieces that we can put together in order to fix this. There are pieces of this that are under this board's control and that are under WMATA's control, such as the fare policy, such as our advertising policies, such as non-union labor force size and compensation. We will need to understand the exact magnitude of every piece every lever that we can pull on as a board and as an authority, and what we can potentially do with that. We will then need to communicate very transparently what that is and what's left. I am not empowered as the district's representative on the board to solve this problem alone. There are those pieces that I and we can work on. I will be asking mayor and council, and I already have asked, for direction on what we want Metro to be and how we're going to pay for it. That's a conversation that has to happen with the whole region. There is no bank account somewhere that has money in it that we could just go to in order to do something about this. That's true of WMATA, but it's also true of the district. The district is under financial and fiscal legal requirements that other jurisdictions are not under in order to always have a balanced budget projected forward 4 years and to be sure that we are doing everything that we're supposed to be doing fiscally. So we have to be realistic about how we're going to solve this. And we have to distinguish between how we solve this for FY25 and to the general manager's point, how we solve it in the long term. Regardless of whether the number is 750, whether it's $1 billion, whatever the number is, we understand that part of this solution is going to involve raising new revenue. But raising new revenue takes time. If we create a new revenue source, the money does not appear in the bank account tomorrow. It takes time for for a mechanism to be created and for the cash to actually come in. So for FY25, we have not just a deficit, but a cash flow problem. Even if we are able to create a structural solution for the long term, we have 2 conversations that we will have to have this year at the same time. One, what can we do for FY25 in terms of cash flow, and what service will we be able to offer that matches that cash flow? And then in the longer term, what do we want WMATA to be, and how are we going to pay for it? We have to walk and chew gum at the same time and figure out how to have both of those conversations. To the general manager's point, those conversations should not be conflated, but we will have to do a better job than usual of talking to each other instead of past each other in order to have both of those conversations. I hope we're all up for it.
Great comments. Thank you. Mr. Smember.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Ms. Klein. I mean, this should not be a surprise to anyone who follows Metro. And I know from congressional staff to jurisdictional staff and others, this is not a surprise. But yet, it is still a very sobering report. And I also agree with Sarah that hopefully it's the wake-up call that the region needs to really come together in a thoughtful, consensus-building way to really tackle the issue once and for all. You know, it may take a stage or two, but I think, you know, we'll get there. Tom and Yatende, I want to talk a little bit, though, about, you know, the service issue. There's so much of the focus, and where I think a lot of people believe, you know, the most cuts could come from would be service. But isn't there a danger there, though, or maybe this is a question for Randy, isn't there a danger, though, of, you know, getting to a point where service is reduced so to, you know, to such a point, there's like cascading effect, where we're going to continue to lose ridership, we're going to continue to lose revenue, you're going to have to reduce staff. How do you get that staff back if service comes back? To me, I would think that would be a really sort of devastating sort of step to take for a whole host of reasons. And again, as we saw from the last proposal, which was modest compared to what you're highlighting here today, the reaction really was very swift in the region. So I'm just big picture, I'm really concerned that there's so much focus early on just simple service levels. Yes, ultimately we have to make Metro what the region wants it to be and how we're going to get there and fund it. But yet service seems so central to the mission. I'm really concerned about that cascading effect and what it would mean for the organization as a whole and for the region. And the investment that this region has made over the last 45 years in Metro.
I
They're throwing it out there, but it's really, I think, a central question.
Yeah, I'll take comment, and then it looks like Tom might want. So one, I really appreciate your comments because service is the mission, period. That's what we exist to do, connect people to possibilities. So it is the quintessential death spiral. And I think we are talking a lot about service because, quite frankly, that's the only tool we have in our toolbox at Metro. 70% of our cost structure is labor. Therefore, as Tom mentioned, we're such a high fixed versus variable cost type of business model. Like this year, I think we added about 10% of service and for about 2% of budget. So, a couple percent here and there we can play around with and very, very little marginal cost. To save $750 million, the cuts are draconian, devastating. Tom used the word terrible. We're going to have a lot of adjectives thrown around here. Well, our friends on the media table will come up with whatever one they want to use, but they're all the same. It is the region that we know today, in my opinion, does not exist with these cuts. So anyone that doesn't use Metro, that drives a car, their life went to total misery with traffic. Everyone that relies on Metro will not be able to rely on it in the future. If you have apartments or development around a station, it's going to go drastically impacted. Our environmental conditions are going to get significantly worse and on and on. So I think we were talking about service because it's the only tool it's a blunt instrument for us. We don't have our own dedicated revenue source. We're not a taxing authority. So this is the one kind of tool we're left. And I appreciate Board Member Letourneau brought up. Fair policy is not going to solve this either. It doesn't mean that 15, 20, 40, it doesn't matter what millions matter. Of course they do. And every day we're trying to collect every single fare we can. On to Board Member Baber's comment, $300 million saved. The staff, I've been here a year. I think the staff has done a really good job at that. The previous general manager put a lot of effort into cost cutting. I think at one point, he publicly said, we're kind of almost cut down to the bone already. We're going to keep looking. You saw the presentation on 8Ks. That change saves about $10 million just on energy costs with that fleet. The team was here about maybe a meeting ago talking about call center consolidation. That's $3 or $4 million there. There's things we're going to keep looking at, but that's not going to move the needle either. We could get rid of 30% of the administrative staff who's already totally overworked, have higher risk of compliance issues and other topics, and it would save a few $1 million on the side. At the end of the day, it comes back to the structural issue that Board Member Klein. So I guess the summary point, Mr. Chair, is I think we need to show people that service is the only thing that we have to move, but I remain very optimistic and bullish, quite frankly, that not only will this not happen, I think people want actually Metro to be more than it is today. So it's a challenge of how to talk about that because it is the only one thing we can. So, Tom, you might also want to mention, because I think this is important, we have a slide there. Metro also has a standard that is not really followed by a lot of our industry peers. Not that they don't want to, but we have a very high standard. If you're from around the country and you come to a Metro station, overwhelmingly, I have friends that show up here, they're like, your stations are so clean. We staff our stations. We have almost 1,000 elevators and escalators that most places don't have. So our accessibility, we're the most accessible transit system in America. We have an enormous police presence and security presence. We're part of the national security infrastructure of this country. We do work with the Capitol Police and Secret Service, FBI on a daily basis. As Tom, there is a slide now, Tom, if you want to add to it, these cuts not only touch service, they go into the quality and safety of the overall system that we produce as well. And that is something we have to be very cautious of as well, because once you go down to that part, Mr. Chairman, on the death spiral, it's not just service, it's pulling yourself out of the quality. It takes a lot to hire someone at a good technical position, and so laying people off and getting them back doesn't happen. Quite frankly, we are probably paying more now because we laid off people and didn't hire 2 years ago. The actual ROI on that is probably in the negative if we just had kept people. It's easy to say that now, but so everything has this moving effect. So Tom, I don't know if you want to add anything on that, probably a little more concise than I just did, but I use it as a chance to respond to about 5 or 6 board members because all in the same kind of theme.
No, I think, Randy, that's a good summary. There's certainly some more detail we can go into over the next few months as well on those standards and those expectations that our customers now have of the service quality and the experience. We do have stations that are places, not just where the bus stops or the train stops. It's a place that's part of the community, and there's a cost associated with that.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, Tom, you mentioned, Miranda, Yatende, about the fixed cost and the impact on the overall budget, which is big. But what about indexing? As I understand it, we really don't have anything in our budget in terms of revenue or anything that is tied to any kind of economic indicator, whether it be for the region or nationally, CPI or something, regional cost of living. I mean, there's nothing, again, to Sarah's point about the structural, deficiencies of some of our funding model. There's nothing in there for indexing. Is there? Is that correct? I think that's the case.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smithberg. So that's correct on the funding side of it.
Yeah.
But on the uses of the funds, we are indexed, and we felt the large impact of that in FY24 as we developed the budget. Most would recall that we had a large increase associated with our contractual agreements and collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah,
Are you saying we already ate the seed corn?
Something like that.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was, yeah.
Got
so it's on the revenue side. Yeah, I should have been a little more precise. But yes, the revenue side of things, there's no
Correct.
indexing and never has been.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions, comments from board members? So I think in summary, any meeting that has death spiral in it is not going to be a good, fun conversation. We know we have our own work to do at Metro, whether that's fair or continued cost cutting. We also know that the impact of labor reductions are long-term because you can't just turn around and rehire those folks. And it's difficult in this labor market as it is just to hire, to keep positions and keep our workforce. But the big takeaway is Metro cannot solve this on its own. We need all of our partners to work with us, business community, government, federal government, everyone to come to the table and be part of this solution. And I think we've got a good group up here that's working on it and with staff. So hopefully this will kick off a good conversation. So with no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned, and that leads to our elections committee, and I think I'm turning it over to Ms. Babers.
Thank you, Director Letourneau. Thank you and good morning. This is a meeting of the Elections Committee of the Metro Board of Directors, and I'm Lucinda Babers, the Elections Committee Chair. I'd also like to note that I'm joined by the other 3 members of the Elections Committee this morning, Mr. Letourneau, Mr. Drummer, and Ms. Martin Proctor. I'd like to start our meeting by asking for the committee's approval of the agenda and the minutes. Approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any suggested changes to the agenda? If there are no objections, I'll consider the agenda accepted as presented. Approval of the minutes. Now we have the minutes from our last public meeting in June 2022 and the committee's executive session on June 8th of this year for approval. Unless there are any objections to the minutes as presented, we'll consider them approved. Any objections? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes as approved. We only have one item on our agenda today, to nominate board officers for the coming year, fiscal year 2024. The board has aligned officers' terms with Metro's fiscal year, which runs from July 1st through June 30th. So officers who are nominated at this committee meeting and elected at the board meeting will begin their terms on July 1st. I move the following individuals to serve as the board's officers for FY 2024. Chair, Paul Smedberg. First Vice Chair, Joe McAndrew. Second Vice Chair, Tracy Hayden Lowe. Could I get a second from a committee member?
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Letourneau. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask Ms. Ellison to conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Babers?
Aye.
Mr. Letourneau?
Aye.
Mr. Drummer?
Aye.
Ms. Martin Proctor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. These nominations will now be referred to the board for action at our meeting later this morning. With no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. We're going to take a brief break, approximately 5 minutes, before beginning the board meeting. Thank you.
Chair of the WMATA Board, thank you for being here today at our Board of Directors meeting. Since we called roll at an earlier committee meeting, we'll move right to the approval of the agenda. If there are no objections, I'd like to consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections? Hearing and seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Next, approval of minutes. We have 5 sets of minutes for approval. The board meeting of November 11th and executive sessions from November 11th, the 24th, 30th, and June 8th. I'd like to consider these sets of minutes approved as presented. Does anyone have any comments or objections to any of those sets of minutes? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the employee spotlight, where we recognize employees for heroism, service, and dedication. Unfortunately, our first honoree, business operator Mikonhe K. B-Day, is under the weather and is not able to join us here today. Hopefully we can recognize him at a future meeting. Next, I'd like to recognize 2 of MTPD's finest for their recent honors. First, Officer John Yubere. Officer Yubere was recently named MTPD's Officer of the Year for 2022. Typically, these nominations recognize an officer for one incident where an officer performed exceptionally well. However, in this case, the officer exceeded extraordinary standards at least on 4 occasions in 2022, thereby demonstrating exceptional work ethic, judgment, courage, and attitude. According to his peers, Officer Uribe also maintains a positive attitude, has assisted multiple officers, and has helped close several cases. His work stands in his example for other officers throughout the agency. Please join me in congratulating Officer John Yubere for being named MTPD's Officer of the Year. Next, we'll recognize Detective Brett Chavis. Mr. Chavis, please stand. Detective Chavis was recently named MTPD's Detective of the Year for 2022. Detective Chavis was selected for producing high-quality work that distinguished him as an elite investigator in MTPD's Criminal Investigation Division. He was tasked with some of the unit's most high-profile cases in 2022, and still managed to complete the year above a 45% clearance rate. Detective Chavis' unique and innovative investigative strategies allowed him to provide excellence in service to the victims in his assigned cases. Please join me in congratulating Detective Brett Chavis for being named MTPD's Detective of the Year. And finally, we'd like to recognize several employees whose work was essential for the successful opening of the new Potomac Yard station. I'd like to start to thank Fred Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Senior Capital Project Manager for the Potomac Yard station. He was responsible for managing the entire Potomac Yard project, specifically the contractors and Metro teams that worked to open the station to the public. As a Metro representative, Fred has been a positive fixture in the Alexandria community for the past 4.5 years. Thank you, Fred, for all the work you have done and for your dedication to Metro. Next, we'd like to thank Senior Project Manager Nile Babu. In her role, she led the planning of the track cutover, which included system testing and commissioning to allow the trains to pass through the station after the tie-in work was completed. Nila was also responsible for leading all required testing and commissioning activities in support of the station opening. Thank you, Nila, for all your hard work in managing the Potomac Yard cutover and for making safety the highest priority. And finally, we'd like to recognize several employees for their leadership and contributions to the opening of the Potomac Yard Station. Will the following employees please stand? James Powers, Assistant Project Manager, Replacement, Expansion, and Capacity. Mr. Powers is not here with us today. Timothy Perrine, Director of Safety and Security Certification. Dwayne Perry, Fire Marshal, Office of Emergency Preparedness. Mitch Nietzsche, there we are, General Superintendent, Elevator and Escalator. Yeah, stay stand.
We'll get
We'll get it, yeah. Gideon Gibri Harmarian, Assistant Program Manager, or Project Manager. Anthony Neekum, Vertical Transportation Safety Inspector. Dwayne Lloyd, Director, Plant Maintenance. Paul Cram, Project Manager, Plant Maintenance. Isaiah Bratcher, Superintendent, Plant Maintenance. The board would like to extend its thanks and deep appreciation to you and for all your tireless work on the Potomac Yard project. And if we could have everyone join us up front, we'll get a picture. Thank you.
Everyone's excited about Potomac Yard, but it's 90% Paul Smith or 10%.
Lucinda, for your recognition. So you're not surprised.
No problem.
Okay, next we'll move on to the report, public comment and reports from our advisory board. We have 5 public in-person speakers today.
2 online.
Yeah, and 2 online. Are we going to do the online first? Or
Yes.
we should, yeah, we'll do the online first.
Good morning. This is Jacob Vesalotti, resident of Washington, D.C. Thank you to the WMATA board and staff for boosting service and implementing rider suggestions for the new fiscal year. One point of improvement that I would like to suggest is greater transparency about the implementation of these changes. I assumed that the approved fare changes would go into effect July 3rd, the first weekday in the new fiscal year, not June 26th. I was surprised and somewhat upset to see that the first public announcement about these fare changes taking effect was buried in a June 9th press release about red line service improvements. It is unacceptable, in my opinion, for such changes to be announced after riders like myself have already purchased monthly passes. Now my pass will not cover the amount of my commute to and from work for the last week of June, and I will have to add extra money to my Smart Trip card. This should have been announced last month so riders that will experience fare increases can plan ahead. There seems to be a pattern of misleading and confusing riders over the past few months with the termination of Yellow Line service to Greenbelt 2 months before the end of the fiscal year, telling riders that peak fares are being eliminated when many riders will see massive fare increases all day that are sometimes higher than the peak fares they pay now, implementing the new fares a week before the new fiscal year starts, and also telling riders that Green Line service will improve to 6-minute headways for the new fiscal year, but then later backtracking that they will remain 8 minutes until the summer shutdown concludes on Labor Day. I asked the board and communications team to consider more straightforward announcements that will clearly communicate what is happening and when it will happen in advance of any planned changes that will impact riders. Thank you for your time and for all you do to keep Metro safe and operational.
Hello. Hello, this is Barbara DeZalduando. I am a resident of Washington, D.C., in the AU Park area. I want to comment that it would be devastating to cancel the N4 bus from Friendship Heights down the Western Avenue. Please don't cancel it. I'm 72 years old, and it's my most important form of transportation, both to get to the Red Line Metro or to get all the way down to downtown. That's, again, the N4 bus is a very important part of living in the district, and I really count on it. Please don't cancel it. Thank you. Again.
Thank you for those comments. Now we have 5 public speakers here today in person. I'll remind folks you do have 2 minutes. The first is Ansel Torres. Mr. Torres. Ansel, nice seeing you.
Yes, hello. Okay. Let me get the microphone adjusted. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Let me just say I'm not really worried about Metro getting its money. This is the way it seems as though business is done in Washington. You know, the same thing we had with the credit limit thing, and, you know, all kinds of scenarios, negative scenarios were projected, and the money appeared. I mean, this is DC. This is the center of power in the United States. Anyway, I'm concerned about transparency in budgeting for Metro Access. I'm a blind Metro Access user. There was a $42 million surplus in the fiscal year 2022 budget, and no one is willing to say at Metro where that surplus money went. It was not spent on Metro Access needs. It was spent elsewhere. I would like to know where it went, because we have needs. And one of the needs that we have is an app that tells us where a ride is. Other Metro riders have that service. I understand that there's a new dashboard that is coming up soon that will give all kinds of statistics about bus and rail, but there's nothing there about Metro Access transportation and where our rides are when we need them. Okay, the information that we get right now is faulty, it's wrong, And I actually believe many times we're just simply being lied to. That has to stop. There is a new tool that Metro is introducing, supposedly to track our transportation. I want to say quite bluntly, it's a joke. It's a dollar store solution for a very big problem, annoying problem that we've been having, and I trust that will be corrected. I urge Mr. Clark to take a look at it because it is incompatible with his professed commitment to transparency and communication of information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. We don't normally do this, but maybe I'll have the general manager just respond because.
Yeah, I really appreciate your comment. So I'm going to ask Sarah Mayer, our new customer experience officer, to connect with you, sir. But before you leave today, yes, it is, sir. Yeah, you as well. And I really appreciate your comment. So access to customer information is absolutely critical. One of the top things we're working on. So I'm going to actually have Sarah to have a conversation with you before you leave today. Brian Dwyer is our Chief Operating Officer. He as well. So Christian Blake, who you know, works for Brian. So by no means do we not think Metro access is important. I want you to know that. I bring that up at a lot of meetings all the time. So your comments will be taken to heart, and we'll try to follow up. One of the tools we have to do is make sure that you have the ability to know when a trip is going to arrive, if it's delayed, etc. So thank you very much for the comments, and we'll keep in close contact on that stuff.
All right, thank you. Mr. Golash, Michael. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Mike Golash, a DC resident. I think obviously Metro's problems center with sources of revenue. One of the key things that Metro has to address is the federal subsidy for operations. As you know, there are no operating subsidies for Metro. So when a federal employee rides the train or the bus, he gets a pass and he pays the fare. But that fare only represents half the cost or a quarter of the cost or some percentage of the actual cost of the ride. We have to make an effort to have the federal government make up that difference so they actually pay for the true services that we're providing to their workers to operate the federal government properly. The second thing is we've done many studies over the years about the economic engine that Metro is in this community. Rod Green at Howard did a study about it 25 years ago about value added. The Northern Virginia Transit Commission has done many studies on the economic impact of Metro. The value that accrues to the business and developers from the services that we provide, they have to be taxed at a higher rate than they currently are. They have to pay for the service that we provide for them, and they don't do that. The local politicians basically have never gotten on board with raising taxes on those businesses. Until that's done, I don't see how we're going to solve Metro's problems. Like Mr. Clark said, we're not going to save it by raising fares or cutting service, because that will simply put Metro into a death spiral. We cut service and it takes you half an hour to get to work now, winds up taking an hour and a half. You're going to find an alternative source of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golash. Our next speaker is Mr. Orleans, Bill Orleans.
Good morning, all. I arrived in time for the Finance Committee meeting, and I'd like to point out that this presentation the staff prepared and left copies on the table out front didn't quite match the presentation they actually delivered. I'm guessing that there were about 20 or 25 additional pages, and that they were shown out of sequence maybe doesn't matter very much, but at the very least, someone making the effort to come here to this meeting and picks up a packet of the presentation outside should have an opportunity to see the whole presentation and not only a part of it. I've been informed that someone's going to make the attempt to get me the whole presentation, the additional slides after this meeting is over. I look forward to it, but that should not be the case going forward. I heard Mr. Letourneau say that this year, unlike past budget shortfalls, the sky really is falling. I'll accept that the board suggests that this year the sky really is falling. Whether it is or not, I don't know, but I'll accept it's your view of it. I've suggested in the past, and I'm going to suggest again, that the board, independent of its appointing, designating authorities, not seeking direction from them, but independent of the appointing authorities, should adopt a budget reflecting the necessaries for the forthcoming fiscal year, and it should simply bill the states and also the feds. Simply send them an invoice. This is what we need for the next year, pay up. I've been requesting for more than 2 years now a return to something customer information related that is sorely missing in the WMATA system, a bus timetable. None exist that have been published within the last 5 or 6 years before the pandemic that reflect the reality of the schedules today. Even where there are ride guides, certainly at the stations and on some poles around the region, those ride guides are way out of date. At least minimally, those ride guides should be updated to reflect the real-time expectation of the bus schedules. I have 2 more very quick items. I'd like to know, I've requested, not publicly, but in talking with staff and haven't heard back, I'd like to know when the memorandums of understanding with local jurisdictions, police departments, are going to be made public. I would like to see
15 seconds,
one
Mr. Orleans.
reflective of my local jurisdiction. Lastly, I've requested with Mr. Clark, our new general manager, unsuccessfully, and with other staff, since I was able to publicly return to our new building here, when was it, back in November, unsuccessfully 5 minutes with Mr. Clark. No one has been able to arrange those 5 minutes with Mr. Clark yet, so I will state publicly, very quickly, my reason for wanting to speak to him.
Thank you, Mr.
Once upon a time, after much whining, the public was allowed to participate in the most important meeting that takes place in this building, and that's not this meeting, not the board's meeting, not the committee meetings, but the JCC. That public ability of the public to attend those meetings was removed 3 general managers ago, and I would like the new general manager to once again make it available to the public to attend those meetings, the JCC meetings. Thank you.
Next speaker, Rico Dancy, followed by our final speaker, Denise Rush. Mr. Dancy. Rico, can we bring in a microphone?
Good afternoon. Good morning. So the first thing is a lot of people depend on Metro Access who live independent like I do. And we want to make sure that Metro Access don't get cut. People can go on a doctor's appointment, everything. And I want to talk about your transit. Y'all have an app. Every officer have an app called VRI, stands for Video Remote Interpreter. 2 years ago, I brought that to them. Some of them officers are not using, if they have a deaf person coming from out of town, want to ask questions. When you call them, are they trained how to use the app? Are they trained to use the VRI service? Because DC have a deaf and hard of hearing unit. If I remember, they're the one who came and teach them how to use the service. If they get new officers, they need to be trained how to use the app, the VRI, all this. Because I was at the Union Station, and I asked the officer where to go to this. Did they use the VRI? No. Okay, they will force a person who's deaf or hard of hearing to read lips, and that's not what the VRI stand for. It's for service the people that is service the people there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dancy. Final speaker, Denise Rush. We're bringing a mic over, Denise.
Good morning. My name is Denise Rush, and most people already know who I am, and I'm representing usually the accessibility committee. But after hearing the deficit that we are facing, it's a community thing. It's going to tremendously, if there's a cutback, upset the visually impaired, the disability community, accessibility. But this deficit is going to affect the community, everybody, Maryland, DC, and Virginia. Your presentation told us what the deficit, but you didn't give us any suggestions on what we can do to meet it. Before the meeting, I passed out my name, my email address, and my telephone number. Please call and tell me what the community that I represent can do to make this deficit happen. The app or the tool that Mr. Torres is talking about, so that we will know when we receive a ride or it's coming, is new. And for technical people, they need it and they use it. I'm not that technically capable to ever use it, probably. I might, but there are people who are not technical, and so that tool gets them started. It doesn't do what they want them to do, but it's headed in the right direction. Please contact me and get me headed in the right direction to make this deficit work. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And just to be clear, we don't want the deficit to happen.
Yeah.
We know what you meant, but just so you know. Working hard not to make that happen. Anyway, thank you all for your comments. Next, we'll hear from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, Mr. Sheehan. Pat, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I'm sorry I'm not there. It was an interesting presentation on the fiscal cliff coming up. But work somehow double booked or triple booked me this afternoon, so I had to be here. But hopefully I'll be with you guys, everybody, in July. I have a few things I want to talk about. First, to start off with respect to the gangway cars. We have been working diligently with Lynn Bowersox, who has been to many of our meetings, and we appreciate the work that she's doing. There have been 14 recommendations that we have suggested, and they are tracking those recommendations, particularly the ones that are of interest to the disability community, is lighting and maps, seat placement, and security of the seating, where wheelchairs will be located within the cars. And particularly one thing that we've run across in the past is the between car door barriers. I have seen recommendations on where those between car door barriers, how they will look. We're looking forward to working with you. We've seen some issues with respect to that and the safety. Also, there have been some other presentations with respect to areas on the platform where you might have stanchions that would keep people from walking in between the cars. I think we have enough time to move forward with that and come up with a good, safe alternative to that particular problem. Since these types of cars are all over the world, it would be interesting also to see what has been done in other locations moving forward. Bottom line on the 8K series cars, AAC has made recommendations, and those recommendations look like they are being looked at very seriously. Once again, we appreciate all of the attention that you're putting into disability issues. Metro access, we looked at metro access issues. The tool that was discussed by Denise and then also by Ansel Torres, I have used that tool about 3 or 4 times, And it has been good. Working and giving feedback to Mr. Blake, he indicates that, of course, it's not everything that we would get from, let's say, an Uber or a Lyft model for where my ride is, but it is an improvement over what we've done with calling in for Where's My Ride. It does give you real-time information. There are other suggestions moving forward that we're going to get that I think are on a roadmap moving forward. So I am pleased that we are getting real-time information with respect to that, and look forward to improvements in the future. AAC is willing to assist in that area, and we've got some good people that can help move that tool forward. So thank you for that work. I took a look at the Waymaps project also at the beginning of June. Internal GPS within the subway systems. Very impressive. One of the things that it actually did a nice job with that I did not expect was its ability to tell me exactly where the door was when a train pulled in. I thought that was very good. The accuracy was good inside the station. I talked with the head of the Waymaps product over in Europe, and he has a lot of recommendations that have come in from the Office of ADAP, Access Services, and they are putting those on a roadmap, and they're going to make decisions. I'm very pleased to see that the Waymap project will probably be shared with the disability community, particularly blindness community in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Maryland. He expects sometime in September. So that seems to be moving along nicely. The Better Bus Network, I know that we have talked a lot about that within AAC, and I know that also, of course, RAC has too. The suggestions, I think, that moving forward with the Better Bus Network are good. I spoke with Denise Rush a few weeks ago, and she talked about how she went over to one of the pop-ups. She gave them 4 sites that she was interested in going to. All 4 were part of the Better Bus Network. I think she was pretty happy with that. That's great. It's very ambitious. It's what we need. I'm very pleased with what is going on in PG County with respect to enhancing the bus routes there. And I would also add that enhancing the bus routes has a good effect on the Metro Access system. It's going to make sure that that system is more robust, covering areas that it has not before. Our first priority, at least my first priority, has always been, let's get the fixed route system as robust, efficient, and effective as it possibly can be. But of course, anything that we improve for the fixed route system, we're improving for the Metro Access system. And then lastly, I will just quote Denise, understand what's going on with respect to the fiscal cliff upcoming in 24, 25. And we are prepared as part of the AAC to lend whatever hand we can to make sure that that does not happen. We have made great strides thanks to a lot of you and the advocacy of the AAC and others to make good improvements over the years. We don't want to lose those. We want to keep the systems straightforward, sustainable, safe. So anything that we can do, you know how to reach us, and we're happy to assist in whatever way we can, including letting our networks, as Denise said, know that we need to do some outreach and make sure that transportation is effective and useful in the years ahead. Are there any questions for me?
Thank you, Pat. Any questions for Pat? Comments? Okay. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work, as always. Now we'll call in Mr. Leibowitz for the RAC report.
Good afternoon. As always, thank you for giving opportunity for the RAC and to talk about some of the things here. So the RAC's, so our priority continues to be to raise, kind of conduct rider outreach regarding the day-to-day issues of concern to riders, as well as to address some of the bigger picture issues that will obviously affect riders as well. That's our priority that we're focusing on these past few months, and that's what's been going on in our meetings. So for some of the day-to-day, one of the things we've met with Ms. Jordan Holt talking about the performance dashboard, and they're doing an excellent job putting that together. We're really impressed with that. The one area that I think the RAC pretty unanimously recommended, and recommended as well as here, is that including in the dashboard data also include crime information, the real-time crime information. That's something that's important as people plan their trips. It's important to just so they can get the realistic, transparent what's going on, but also to address perception issues where, they might actually show that the perception isn't always the reality one way or the other. So we think that's something important for the dashboard as they move forward with that. Another rider outreach that was that we've heard a lot about, I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, is it's getting a little bit moot somewhat on the Silver Line side, but the shuttle service in Northern Virginia between Ballston and McLean. So I've seen this personally as well, and we've heard a lot from riders about the shuttle service. And one of the successes, I think, in the way I think a model that we can do moving forward and addressing closer to real-time issues with the board and with staff is what happened is that, so our meeting was in early June when the shuttle system was I think, less than ideal, to be blunt. And so the RAC, through our liaison, we had a good long discussion about this and immediately sent some of our proposals and outreach points through a liaison that ended up at staff and to you, Mr. Smedberg. And we were very heartened for the fact that this didn't languish, that our information was passed immediately to the relevant personnel, and that was in conjunction, as they were obviously, apart from the RAC's input, addressing some of the issues that we observed. I mean, and so I think that's a model. That's something that the RAC will, not in every instance, but in instances where there is a time factor, where there is kind of this public outcry that, at least as we saw it with the shuttles, so that we can kind of move those, get that before, so we don't have to come to the board at the end of the month when something's going on at the beginning of the month and kind of say, hey, kind of what I told you in a few meetings ago was, I view the RAC in part as kind of the canary in the coal mine for day-to-day rider issues to identify things before it becomes such a big problem that it's forced to deal with it in a worse way. So, but we do appreciate that, and we do look forward to doing that again. And also, just regarding the shuttle service as well, we do think that there should be a good after-action review after this regarding future station closures, whether it's Northern Virginia or elsewhere along the transit area. And at the RAC meeting, we discussed other alternatives because what we noticed was, in a lot of the problems with congestion and the delays and the lines that were going around the building and things like that, particularly at Ballston, was that it seemed, at least to us, was that the focus was on literally filling the gaps between Ballston, the closed stations, so Ballston and then McLean, excuse me, get really excited about transit. Ballston and McLean or so that people get to, whether it's the Silver Line or to the Orange Line. And one of the things that we looked at in talking to riders and taking alternatives myself, public transport alternatives, was there's other ways maybe that staff in the future can look at to kind of alleviating this as a little less out of the box. So for example, instead of adding more shuttles from Roslyn to McLean or something like that, look at some of the alternatives, like for example, the 599 and the 698, which are buses. I think one of them at least is Fairfax Connector that goes from large commuter lots at Reston and then the 698 at Vienna, and then those go straight to the Pentagon, which then is a really quick shot through the yellow line into the core. And a lot of riders are doing that. But those bus lines are limited in the times that they operate. And the RAC, one of the discussions was perhaps we can, something like that, at least for this example, like a 599 plus or a 698 plus, where it bolsters what already exists through time and through the kind of the intermediate part, and then let people know that there are other alternatives so that there are still going to be people that are going to go go to Ballston and go to McLean in that example, but also maybe if someone's going to like Federal Triangle or Metro Center, then maybe they want to take the bus from the parking lot if they're commuting from Northern Virginia suburbs, take it there. It's a 30-minute ride, 5 minutes to, past L'Enfant. And it's just, that's the way we looked at it as far as alternatives. And I know personally, every single day at these bus stops, people are like, is this the 599? Is this going here? And I remember helping a very nice, older lady, being here, let me take you over here. And other riders were doing that well. So riders did really assist each other in kind of getting through that. So, and the final item I wanted to talk about is more of just a heads up of something that the RAC is working on. So the RAC is in the initial phase of identifying other rider-centric organizations and groups so that we can establish working relationships. And we're talking about inviting some of them to our next RAC meeting in July. And our goals would be to build awareness between the disparate WMATA rider groups and people with the interest of that, explore opportunities for collective impact when working together, and identifying additional opportunities for WMATA to engage riders during the, what we talked about today, this fiscal cliff issue. And part of the vision is to provide a unified, broader voice from the rider perspective to educate about how the potential fiscal cliff, for example, will impact riders throughout the transit zone, and obviously how the results will be so catastrophic to riders of every way of life around here, livelihoods, everything like that, as well as to people that don't normally take it because of the cascading effects that was discussed earlier. But the idea is the RAC, I think in the past, hasn't really expanded beyond its own kind of little world through our bylaws, and what I want to do and what the RAC has discussed doing is establishing these relationships so that we can, when it's called for it, for educational purposes and things like that, to create the wider voice and common cause, for example, the AAC and other organizations. And subject to your question, that's what I have for the RAC.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions or comments from Michael? Tracy?
Just a quick comment. I mean, great work. Like, you guys are thinking about this the right way. I would love to hear more details about the shuttle feedback story. I had a real tough time with that shuttle myself, I will admit. It's just hard to figure. I kind of whiffed it. I messed up. So I appreciate the effort that you guys are putting into thinking through your role and how to add value here at WMATA, because you're needed. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Appreciate it. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. That concludes our advisory committee reports. Now we'll move on to the chair's report. And unfortunately, I have to begin my report on a sad note today. We are losing a very thoughtful and stellar board member and just an all-around wonderful person to retirement. As many of you know, Deputy Mayor Lucinda Babers is retiring from DC government next week. I'm sure I speak for others when I say Lucinda will be greatly missed, and your departure leaves quite a gap on the board. But I'm glad that you're here with us in person to actually receive this honor. It's not often that we actually get to do this in person, actually, just the way calendars and life plays out. But if you would join me up front, please. Yeah. So I'd like to move approval of the following commendation. Whereas Lucinda Babers has faithfully represented the District of Columbia on the Metro Board of Directors from May 2021, and whereas Lucinda Babers has announced her retirement from service to the District of Columbia and will be stepping down from the Metro Board effective July 1st, 2023. And whereas during her tenure on the board, Ms. Babers served as the board's first vice chair and the vice chair of its Executive Committee and Finance and Capital Committee. And whereas in combining her roles as both the Metro board member and the district's deputy mayor for operations and infrastructure, Ms. Babers occupied a unique position to simultaneously champion Metro and the district's interest on projects such as the dedicated bus lanes and bus lane enforcement, joint development, and Metro fare policy. And whereas Ms. Babers, as vice chair of the board's Finance and Capital Committee, played a critical role in the development and adoption of Metro's fiscal year 24 budget, which will implement some of the most sweeping changes to Metro's fare structure and service levels since the system's creation. And whereas Ms. Babers lent her leadership, vision, and customer-focused transportation expertise to the development of Metro's strategic transformation plan, Your Metro, the Way Forward. And whereas as the board's first vice chair and member of the executive committee, she provided key expertise and guidance to the selection panel for Metro's new general manager and chief executive officer. And finally, be it resolved that the Metro Board of Directors offers its sincere gratitude to Lucinda Babers for her service and leadership as a member of the Metro Board of Directors. And be it further resolved that the Metro Board of Directors commends Lucinda Babers for her dedication to providing the best service for WMATA customers and the region. Can I get a second? I hear a second led by Dr. Lowe, but it's unanimous by the board. All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. Dr. Lowe, before we have Lucinda speak, would you like to say a few words?
As a resident of the District of Columbia and your colleague on the board, I will just say that you will be greatly missed. I hope you know that you have an incredible legacy in everything that you've achieved for our city. You've had so much impact on the people, on the teams that you've led, and also the real things that you've gotten done for everyone out there who just wants the government to work and to do the things that it's supposed to do. You will be terribly, terribly missed on team outcomes, and you're irreplaceable. I'm so happy for you that you will have a chance to rest, but we will miss you very, very much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Tracy.
So Lucinda, it's very refreshing to see a government official operate the way you operate. You always gave us the unvarnished truth. We have something in common. We both have some military background. You know, I recognize yours as Air Force, but it's all good. What I will say is, one thing I learned about the Air Force is it's always class, it's always structure, it's always focused, and you do things the right way. Thank you for your contributions. I've only been in the area for a short period of time, but now I know more and I'm learning more about your impact. So I want to say thank you for your impact on me and this board.
Thank you.
Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. Certainly would echo what the others have said. It has been truly a pleasure to get to know you as a person and the incredible career that you've had and legacy that you have here in this region. But you have truly been a supporter of Metro as a whole, and it, I think, really has helped us approach this regionally as we should. Remember our very first conversation, you talked about your excitement about the Silver Line and the ability to take Metro out to Dulles Airport. But you've really led by example and been a really treasured colleague, so we definitely will miss you here.
Thank you,
Well, here, before you speak, I'd like to say a few words. Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, Lucinda, in addition to, being an excellent representative for the district, I think we have really tried to shift to have this board act regionally. And to Matt's point, you have really done that, and that has been so important. And I know personally I appreciated your service on the executive committee. As you know, we've had to deal with many issues. And just being able to call you and talk to you, just given your experience, in your executive roles has been really invaluable. And many people may not know, to Don's point, giving that unvarnished sort of direct advice. You don't let anyone get away with anything. You're extremely observant. And I think I personally, and I know everyone, really did appreciate that approach to many of the issues that, we've had to deal with. So just really sincerely going to miss you, personally and professionally on this board.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, board member, on behalf of the entire staff, I think it's clear we are going to very much miss you. I'm supposed to also ask on behalf of the staff, will you please stay? Yeah, yeah, we can negotiate. I want to say, seriously, you are, another person that's executive and transportation professional. How much I've personally enjoyed working with you. You don't suffer fools, as the board members are mentioning. You are direct, you're to the point, and candid, and it has been very refreshing and very valuable for me as the new general manager. I appreciate the fact that you gave me this opportunity. You were part of the hiring process, and so I really enjoyed getting to know you over the last year. But the last thing I really want to highlight is, I think truly on behalf of all staff, how much you care about the staff, talk about the staff, understand what staff goes through because of your day job, how much you walk the walk. You're on the bus all the time. We talk about that a fair amount. But I think how much respect you've shown for the staff and the recognizing their hard work they do. So we are going to really miss you. I hope when you come back, though, you're going to text me all the time showing the system when it's performing well. But thank you for everything you've given to this organization. As a DC resident, also thank you for all that you've given to the district.
Thank you, Randy. So first and foremost, I want to thank an incredible board. Everyone on this board, we have said this is the best board that you can possibly be on if you have to be on a board of directors, because we really have come together and, we've got things done, Randy, and we're getting things done. And so I'm going to continue to see what you all do, especially how you all deal with the fiscal cliff. So thank you first and foremost to my fellow board members. And then I want to thank the mayor for selecting me and the chairman of the District of Columbia for appointing me. It has been a wonderful, however many years, to be on the board. And WMATA and its incredible staff, thank you so much for everything you have done. And, to Jennifer. Jennifer gets those emails from me. There's a spill on this train, Metro train I'm on, but it gets taken care of. As a avid Metro Rail rider, both rail and bus, it is the best system in the world, in my opinion. I tell everybody that Metro gets you there. And I believe it. I walk the walk. I talk the talk. I've been delighted to be able to participate on the board, and thank you all for everything. Now the plaque. What a photo! Yeah. Don't he take photos of everything?
Okay.
Next, I'd like to highlight that June is LGBTQ Pride Month. It's that time of year when the world celebrates the impact of the LGBTQ community and is on its history locally, nationally, and internationally. Pride is celebrated in June because the Stonewall riots took place in June of 1969. As well as being a month-long celebration, Pride is also an opportunity to peacefully protest and raise political awareness of current issues facing the community. By continuing in this tradition of celebration, we continue to raise awareness, improve the attitudes of society, and encourage inclusiveness. I'd also like to note that June is Men's Health Awareness Month and Caribbean American Heritage Month. And finally, since this is our last board meeting for the fiscal year 2023, I'd like to take a moment and reflect on all the great accomplishments Metro has achieved in the past year. In 12 short months, we've adopted and began to implement a new visionary strategic plan, opened numerous transit facilities, including the Silver Line Phase 2, the Potomac Yard Virginia Tech Station, 2 new Metro offices in the District of Columbia and Maryland, the Bladensburg Zero Admission Bus Facility, and the Yellow Line Bridge and Tunnel Project. Increased bus and rail service, launched a new next phase of Better Bus, initiated Metro Lift, and celebrated the 50th anniversary of Metro Bus. While I can continue with this impressive list, I prefer to make accomplishments come to life with a short video. We have a short video we're going to show.
When I look back at all that Metro has been able to accomplish in this past year, it is truly impressive. When the board selected Randy Clark as our general manager, we talked about his energy and his ability to move Metro forward. I think that the region has seen what we saw. That energy and relentless positivity about what Metro can be reflects the dedication of all the leaders and staff that have been moving this region forward after 3 unprecedented years. Today, we all have a lot to be proud of. I hope you enjoy this look back at fiscal year 2023 and that it gets you as excited as I am for the future of Metro.
I got big dreams. In July 2022, Metro began work on several important initiatives, beginning with our strategic transformation plan. That plan identified the 4 pillars that guide all our decisions: service excellence, regional opportunity and partnership, talented teams, and sustainability. We work diligently to restore the rail and bus service that our customers deserve and that our region sorely needs. In the past year, we've increased train trips by 73% and returned our 7000 series fleet to service. We expanded access to transit system-wide, opening 7 new stations, Potomac Yard and the Silver Line extension to Ashburn by way of Washington Dulles International Airport. We also began to reimagine our Metro bus network through our Better Bus and Visionary Network campaign. Our bus ridership has rebounded to 80% of pre-pandemic levels and is the backbone of transportation in the DMV. We have increased the number of bus operators, and today, some of our expanded bus routes serve more customers than some of our rail lines. We are proud to say that we collaboratively closed the $184 million fiscal year 24 budget gap, allowing us to increase bus and rail service, simplify fares for customers, launch our first ever low-income fare program, cap Metro access fares at $4, further the Better Bus initiative, and enhance safety measures. Safety is a core value at Metro, so we've increased police patrols in stations and on trains and buses. We've enhanced our camera system and hired intervention specialists and Metro ambassadors to ensure customers get the resources and assistance they need. We implemented a number of customer experience improvements, including more transparent communication, better digital signs, and expanded hours for customer support. The changes that we've made matter. Metro ridership has almost doubled in the past year. In addition, customer satisfaction with Metro services increased 16 percentage points higher than it was a year ago, a historic high for the organization. Because the customer experience is so important, we are preparing to open Metro's first integrated control and communication center. This will finally put rail, bus, and police command operations together in one place to improve service, incident response, and real-time customer communication. More help in a future, more service, more access, and more empathy. All actions driving us to deliver a better customer experience for the region. It's been an exciting fiscal year, but certainly not without its challenges. Regardless of what lies ahead, we can say with confidence that your Metro is poised to deliver a better customer experience in the coming days, weeks, and year. I got big dreams. I got big dreams.
Okay, on behalf of the board, we want to thank everyone, our staff, customers, jurisdictional partners, our federal, state, and local elected officials, and many other stakeholders for helping us get to where we are today. We have a lot of work to do in the year ahead, certainly, as we heard earlier this morning. But that concludes my report. Now we'll turn the floor over to the GM and CEO for his report. Mr. Clark.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. That was quite a video, so it's pretty hard to follow you on most days, but especially today, especially when I'm going to say about half the things that were in the video. So I think I'll trim that down. Yeah, exactly. We'll let the video stand. It's hard to believe we're at the end of the fiscal year, and there's some things in that video that we, at least I look at, I'm sure the board you may, it's how quickly we forget about the $184 million budget deficit that we had last year that we solved. And how little service we were running last summer and all these other items. So I'm really proud of what this team has delivered on behalf of this community and our customers. So you get the opportunity to interact with a lot of our senior staff and other members of the management team. I love how we're recognizing different individuals in this organization. So this 12,000 strong team, I think, should be incredibly proud at the end of this fiscal year of where we've come in what is reality, a pretty short amount of time. On this next slide, as we start here, one of the things that we talked about when I first got here, you may remember a version of this, everyone except board member McAndrew wasn't here at the time. We talked about what must-achieves do we have as a team? And some of these were kind of like, okay, we'll see if those can happen. And then we had a group of customer service big wins, because we obviously didn't have a strategic plan at the time, and there was a fair amount of, we'll say, noise or issues. And so how do we ground ourselves? So 7,000 series trains were a very big part of this. And publicly, again, I want to thank our partner at the WMSV. It's been a challenging year back and forth for us and them, but I feel really good about where our partnership is going. We all have the same vested interest in making the metro system as safe as possible for everyone. And obviously our 7,000 series trains are back in action, and we're looking forward to moving forward with the final solution on our wheels with them. We opened the Silver Line. There's a lot of highlights there, but again, that was November. It's almost like it feels like a lifetime ago. We've had, I think the last report was 1.5 million trips already on the Silver Line, so we're probably better part of 2 million at this point. Pretty amazing. Our bus transformation network redesign, actually board member McAndrew in his old role, I think one of the first things he asked me about was, hey, what's going on with this network redesign? Are we going to move this thing forward? And that was sat for a little bit, and we're really moving that hard. It was going to be a 3-year project. We now made that a 2-year project. I'm not sure all the staff loved that comment one day, but they've responded as usual as the great staff they are. And we're moving that forward. Our FY24 budget, we closed that. And what I'm really proud about the budget, and Board Member Letourneau mentioned this, I think, a couple times, is how we did it a little differently. We were really open and transparent about that. We started the process in September on those discussions, and I thank you for all your hard work on that. The strategic plan, we have a North Star at this organization that this board and staff jointly worked collaboratively together. Then we actually went and met with all of our regional stakeholders and got their input, and then public sessions about our strategic plan. I think that goes to this core aspect of it is the community system, and you all as the board and us as staff have a responsibility to hear and do best by them. We did Potomac Yard. I know the chair, probably no happier person outside of Mayor Wilson to get Potomac Yard open. And we put down at the time, we got to get the Orange Line back open on a real rehabilitation project. We had all these near wins too, right? We had to start moving our physical and digital signage. We had a cleanliness, I think, campaign that really needed to happen. It was kind of how do we dust off from the COVID effect of the system, and we really have. I really believe we have a very clean system. One of the things the board asked me. Actually asked me before I started the role was we have to do something with fare enforcement. We had to get control of the system. Appreciate General Counsel Patty Lee and a few staff members and board member Babers working with us. And within a short period of time, we were able to resolve the district citation. We haven't finalized the whole process yet. We're looking forward to our partners in DC, hopefully closing that final loophole and technicality. But we finally got that resolved, and significant work by our Trans Police Department out there. Customer service training, I think we are much more forthright in how we engage our customers now, and that's never going to stop. We're going to keep working on that. 8-car trains, body-worn camera program is actually, I think, pretty close to being completed and rolled out. The consistent customer communication is something I'm incredibly proud of. Christy Benson and her team, we now have longer hours, better social media responses, better responses on phone calls and emails. We need to be there for customers when they need us, and that's not 9 to 5 only. And then we're working on our bus lane enforcement. Again, we'll add to Board Member Baber's highlight reel as she's walking out the door with our Clear Lanes program. We are really moving that along, and it's going to really matter for our system. So the thing that I like about this is literally the slide that we said what we're going to go after, and we completed every single thing. And I think at the time, some of these were probably even stretch goals, and we didn't fully know, but when we ground ourselves in what we want to do, we accomplished it. The next slide, I said at the start, we're working with the board, I think the most important thing we do is how customers measure our performance, or customer satisfaction, because we can all live in our bubble and think we're doing great. What matters is what customers say about us ultimately. On the bus side, we've been, I think, as high as 73, 74. Traffic is starting to probably play with that number a little bit, and we got to clear lanes and some other things will help with that. But on the rail side, we went from 68% to 84. The last time at 84% was recorded, at least the data I saw, was 2013. That is an incredible leap, and I just can't say enough about the team effort that happened to get this number back. I'm on the system every single day. So as a customer, I feel the system is moving in a very good way, but it's great to see customers that not connected to Metro, just regular customers give us feedback on how they feel about the system, and green arrows feel good. The next slide, as you know, Chair, as you mentioned, the strategic plan, and I just want to, at the end of the year, really thank the board. You put in an enormous amount of extra work besides your unpaid nonstop work for Metro. You had all these other workshops. We did public hearings, a lot of engagement on this. I'm really proud of this plan because it finally gives us, whether Board Member Babers leaves the board and someone else comes on, a staff member leaves, we have a document that grounds us in what we are supposed to do for this agency and therefore our customers. So I just want to use that opportunity to thank the board again. The next slide is our budget. The stuff that the chair you mentioned, but a few items there. We are running more service in FY24 than FY23, and that is a real strong commitment that we know we have to serve customers at different times of day and different days of the week. We are adapting. I hear people sometimes say Metro needs to adapt. Couldn't agree more, but we are. That's not a future tense, that's a now tense, present tense. This isn't like, oh, next year we got to be different Metro. We are being a different Metro today. We are running more midday service, more evening service, more weekend service, and it is showing because ridership is coming back. So I am really thankful that we have the leadership on the board to think that way and the staff nimbleness and agility to deliver. Proud of how we moved our zero emission program forward by a few years. The Metro Access fare cap at $4, I think, is an incredible example of us activating equity from our strategic plan. Our low-income fare program that went live this week, and we already have hundreds of people signed up. I think Tom told me yesterday we had 50 or 100 people use the program, I think, in day one. These are the ways that we continue to be a great community service. So really just proud of the budget, and thank you again for all of your efforts in approving that. The next slide, really cool visual here. A couple that I want to highlight, the 105% customer engagement response. These are the little things behind the scenes that I think really will matter a lot as we continue to move this organization forward. That means on a daily basis, we are engaging with the people that need us the most. And that stuff doesn't just happen, right? People think about the buses and the trains and all this other kind of ribbon cutting stuff. It's the behind the scenes stuff that really makes this machine run. And I'm really grateful for how much the team has stepped up there. Our people, our human capital team, we hired almost 1,300 people this fiscal year, including over 600 bus and train operators. Think of what it takes to get that many people hired, trained, certified, and in the job. And, you know, I thank our partners our labor partners. They've been a big part of that as well. That is when we are focused. We put a tiger team together on hiring, and this is what the result was. Liz and the team on our joint development and Amazon affordable housing, just incredible activation. I think it's about 1,000 units now that we partnered with Amazon on, $100 million of investment around transit-oriented development. You had some of the escalator team in here earlier. 21 new escalators delivered in this fiscal year, incredible for safety. But outside of the train and bus being there on time, the next thing I think people care most about at Metro is an escalator and elevator working. They are safer, they're more reliable. So, and then the last one I want to highlight is we exceeded our DBE goal by 33% in this fiscal year. So when you put that all together, we are firing at all cylinders, whether it's on the procurement outcome, the human capital, or the actual service delivery. So I think these numbers speak a lot. And the tag that someone put together, whether it was Christy or someone in her team, but it's 12,000 employees, countless achievements, one Metro. And I think that is a great slogan internally. We are trying to build one culture, not siloed. Everyone is moving in the same direction on this organization. The next few slides are some of those things we talked about. I won't go through them in detail because for time, and we've gone through a lot of them. We'll go to the one after this. I think I had a couple other things that I think we didn't highlight in the video, but I think it's important, again, to go back to this holistic approach of how we are trying to be there for all of our customers at different points a day and not just be evolving. We have customer service ambassadors at Metro for the first time ever, and we're going to be hiring more of those. We've hired crisis intervention specialists. I want to thank the district again on this one. The district served in the hiring process for our crisis intervention specialists, so we could actually have our police department and social workers be more connected to the services that the district and other parts of the region combine. I think that's a good example of that partnership approach that we can continue to work on. Safety is the next slide. We all know that we've had some safety incidents across, basically public safety incidents across the system. Enforcement is up 520% on fare enforcement. I know that's some comments we get about this upcoming deficit, and we talked about that a little bit. But on the other side, we are also really working on how do we be, like I said, the crisis intervention specialists, but also we have Narcan out there. Our officers have saved multiple people's lives in the last few months by deploying Narcan at our stations. So just using that as an example of all over the place, we are trying to hit on all cylinders and really be focused on delivering. We're excited on Hitachi, trying to build our new 8,000 series trains, and Lynn and Brian did a great update on really exciting. That is a multi-decade investment. What trains are going to look and feel like here for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and they're going to be built locally in Maryland with a lot of part suppliers from Maryland, and that's really exciting. And I can't wait to get the board over and then our media partners and public to see our new Metro Integrated Command and Control over at Eisenhower when we open up that later this year. It is going to, I think, fundamentally change how we deliver operations here at Metro by having everyone together, really break down those silos that have existed. Whether you look at NTSB or WMSC reports for the last X amount of years, universal thread under there is we need more integration, collaboration between the operating units, especially on incident response. And I think this is going to significantly do that. So outside of that, the last slide is basically thank you for a great year. And I really want to double down and thank the board for your leadership. When you're new to an organization, you never kind of really know how it's all going to work out, right? You're just going to go as hard as you can and see. You've been just a fantastic board. I appreciate this board has the ultimate challenge, which is the most challenging governance model in transit. You've all been incredibly not only supportive of me as the general manager and the staff, but each other and really thinking regional. And I think that goes a long way to say who you all are, but also the focus of this organization right now. And then lastly, I just want to thank the staff, some of which I see every day on the 8th floor. This team has been pushed incredibly hard. Some would say too hard, but we had a hole that we had to dig out of. We've had, as you said in the video chair, 3 unprecedented years. But I think it's clear Metro is back. We're really delivering right now, and I think it's being seen by the community, and that happens because of the staff. They are giving it all they have for this community, 24/7, 365, and I just can't say enough of how proud I am to be part of the team with them every day. So, with that, Chair, that is my report, and I welcome any feedback, comments, or other things. And I was thinking next month we could talk a little bit about the priorities for next year.
Yeah. Any comments or questions from Mr. Clark? Okay. Seeing none, thank you. Next, we'll move on. We have a report from our Elections Committee, Ms. Babers.
So Chair Smithberg, the following item was referred to the board at this morning's Elections Committee meeting. The committee voted to nominate Paul Smithberg as the board chair, Joe McAndrew as first vice chair, and Tracy Hayden Lowe as the board's second vice chair. Mr. Chairman, I move approval of this slate of officers.
Thank you. There's a motion by Ms. Baber. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Any discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the officers that will be stepping up, and particularly you, Mr. Chairman. We've had a bit of a tumultuous year. We just went through everything that's happened, but the amount of time and effort and integrity that you lead us with is very much appreciated, and I'm glad that you are willing to continue in that role.
All right. We'll ask the board corporate secretary to administer the vote.
Chair Smedberg?
Aye.
Vice Chair Babers?
Aye.
Vice Chair Drummer?
Aye.
Director Klein? Aye. Director Letourneau?
Aye.
Director Lowe?
Aye.
Director McAndrew?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We have one consent item for the board's approval today. I'd like to move approval of the following item: Potomac Yard reimbursable budget amendment. Approval of an increase to the Potomac Yard Station reimbursable budget from $340 million to $350 million, and a concurrent increase of $4.4 million to the fiscal year 2024 capital budget, and an authorization for the GM and CEO or his designee to negotiate and execute an amendment to the Potomac Yard reimbursable agreement to implement the increased budget for the Potomac Yard Station construction. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Any final comments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The item is approved. Next, we'll move on to the reports of the jurisdictions and VTC. I don't have anything. You, Ms. Letourneau? Yep. Nothing. District of Columbia, Ms. Babers, Dr. Lowe.
I just want to remind everyone that we are having the greatest firework display ever seen in the country on July 4th. And I want to encourage everyone to please take Metro Rail, Metro Bus, but check online to make sure that any bus you take, you know exactly where you're getting off, because we will have some road closures. But come, please enjoy your nation's capital.
WSTC, Mr. Drummer. Mr. McAndrew. Federal Government, Ms. Klein.
Yeah, thanks. On behalf of myself and Ms. Martin Proctor, we just wanted to note that today is the 24th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision, which was a landmark case under the Americans with Disabilities Act, finding that people with disabilities cannot be unnecessarily segregated and must receive services in the most integrated setting possible. Public transportation, of course, should be an essential element of achieving that goal, independent and community living. And I'm proud that we've made progress at Metro over the past year, as alluded to in the video and the GM's remarks on that issue. And I look forward to continuing those conversations in the future. And I think this is kind of a lead-in to the fact that in July we will be celebrating the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we can have further conversations on these issues at that time. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Klein. Now I'd like to move a motion for executive session. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsection C, personnel or labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations, consideration or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals, and D, contractual or other matters involving confidential or proprietary concerns or the investment of public funds where discussion in public would adversely affect the financial interest of WMATA, and E, audit matters and investigations to include, for example, audits of IT security matters and investigations to be referred for further criminal investigation or prosecution. Is there a second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you for being here today.